In education, we are not opposed to tax reform, and I think everyone needs to understand that very, very clearly. But it needs to be a very comprehensive look at tax reform. It needs to be research-based and have sound data to support whatever ideas it is that will be forwarded and suggested for us generating revenue. The first point that I would like to make is that property taxes provide a more stable funding source for education. Georgia's sales tax base has been unstable over the last 10 years and tends to trend with fluctuations in the economy. An unstable tax base creates year-to-year uncertainty in revenue predictions for school budgets, making it extremely difficult for boards of education and school administrators to plan for the school's needs. The replacement of property taxes with a state sales tax could create this kind of uncertainty in education funding. School districts throughout Georgia began receiving austerity reductions in state revenue beginning with fiscal year 2003. The reductions have continued for 6 consecutive fiscal years. For the state, these reductions have totaled approximately $1.4 billion. We have responded in our school district to these revenue reductions by tightening our belts and by increasing the local millage rate by a total of 2.35 mills over this 6-year period. The additional local revenue generated by this increase in the local millage rate has not kept pace or generated as much revenue as has been lost through state reductions. With total reliance on revenue from the state for providing educational services to the 1.6 million students in Georgia's public schools, what happens when the state determines that other austerity or QBE reductions are necessary? Also, without a specific formula for earning state revenue to fund public education, we cannot predict how individual school systems might be affected by this. Second point, by replacing property taxes with a state sales tax, financial control over education will be shifted from the local school systems to the state. Obviously, local boards of education will have the authority to determine in some manner how the revenue from the state would be spent in their local school districts. But I believe that local boards of education should have the ability to make the decisions about revenue for education based on their own particular needs. This type of local decision-making is critical to education accountability. Local boards of education are in the best position to determine and create or improve programs to address the needs of their local communities. Many programs funded solely or primarily with local funds such as art, music, elementary foreign language, school nurses, academic coaches, technology, and transportation services could be placed at significant risk. In Henry County, we provide the opportunity for all of our students to be transported to and from school by school bus. However, we only receive approximately $2 million of the $15 million that we spend on transportation services in Henry County. Only $2 million of that comes from the state. So if we're reliant simply on the state funding for education, the question will be, are we going to still have sufficient revenue to transport all of our students to school in a safe manner by school bus in our school district and the other school districts in the state? The third part of this is, in 2001, the Henry County Board of Education, working with its legislative delegation, developed a tax exemption plan for homeowners in Henry County aged 62 and older. For those homeowners in Henry County, they likely would see a significant tax increase with the proposed plan to replace property taxes with an expanded sales tax. Is this the segment of our population to which we wish to shift and increase tax obligation for the funding of education? In many school districts, Henry County included, local boards of education still have bonded indebtedness, which is financed or paid through the levy of additional property taxes over and above the levy for the maintenance and operation of the school systems. It is my understanding that with the proposed tax reform plan, that property taxes that are dedicated to paying off outstanding bonds will still be collected until the bonds are paid off. Will the full implementation of the proposed tax reform plan be delayed while these property taxes are still being collected? If a full implementation of the proposed tax reform plan is introduced in these school systems that still have property taxes to pay off bonds, it will amount to a tax increase for the citizens in these counties. In some counties, the current bond indebtedness may not be retired for 18 to 20 years or more. The final point that I have is the aforementioned bond indebtedness is more likely to exist in large, fast-growth school districts where state funding for capital construction has not met the financial needs to match the growth in student population. In Henry County, approximately 80% of the revenue for new school construction is generated through local sources. Even though we have experienced a slowdown in our growth rate during the past 2 years, we know that it will return to being one of the highest in the state and the nation as the state and country emerge from the slowdown in the housing industry. What options may be available to local school districts for funding capital outlay needs if we are unable to secure bonds through a property tax? I'm aware that under this proposed plan, the revenue generated from special purpose local option sales taxes would increase, but school districts still have the need to bond these funds so that schools can be built and occupied much more quickly. Without that ability, it would probably take us at least twice as long to build and occupy the schools that we're building to meet the needs of our students. I realize that I've ended each of those 5 points that we've discussed here with a question. Not having clear answers to these and several other questions is part of the reason that we're not in a position to support a tax reform plan to completely substitute an expanded state sales tax in lieu of local property taxes for the funding of public education in Georgia. Georgia's public schools are vital to the continued growth, economic development, and prosperity of the state. Because education funding is a critical component to the success of Georgia's schools, this component should not be reliant on an unpredictable and uncertain funding source. Just as I began my comments, I wish to close by stating again that we are very much in favor of the study of a tax reform plan that is comprehensive in nature, based on sound data and research, and carefully studied to provide clear understanding of the economic and governance impact that new or revised taxes would have on providing educational services to the students in Georgia.